Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Rogan addressed briefly in a podcast that he did with Louis J. Gomez, the whole thing that happened at the White House. I just covered this yesterday, so I'm not going to spend the whole episode talking about it. He's talking to Louis J. Gomez here, who is a New York comic and is becoming more of a Rogan glazer because he has his own podcast network, and he's very open about wanting to be a part of the Rogan sphere. So here they're talking about psychedelics a little bit, and the White House stunt comes up, and Rogan's like, "What? Who's pissed? What are you talking about?" And then he doubles down on this politically homeless thing. So here's that real quick.
So you saw that thing that I had to do with the White House the other day?
I did see it.
Yeah.
People are pissed.
Who's pissed?
I don't know. People online.
What, because I was at the White House?
Yeah, they're like, "Yo, Joe, you can't be at the fucking White House, Joe. You said you were fucking politically
homeless." I am.
Homeless.
He joked about it. He called me a liberal during the whole thing. He's like, "Joe, he's very liberal."
What? Oh, I saw another. What did he? The other thing, the big conspiracy theory is that Trump is mad at you, and he came up to the UFC and he was talking shit to you?
No, it was the opposite.
That video came out and it was like, "Look, Trump's fucking Joe Rogan getting embarrassed by Trump at the fucking UFC event."
It was literally the opposite. I texted him on Friday about Ibogaine, and I told him about it. And
have you ever done it?
No, but I had these guys on the podcast, and I know so many people that have done it, particularly soldiers that have done it, and people that with opiate, like my friend Ed. And I told them about it. I said how effective it is, and I said, and it's been held up for so long. And he said, "What are you looking for? Are you looking for FDA approval?" He goes, "It sounds good to me." He said, "Let's do it." And so literally he sees me at the UFC the next day, shakes my hand and says, "It's done."
Wow.
That's what he was saying.
That's so funny.
I was like, and I said, "Thank you, sir." It wasn't like he was mad at me at all.
People jump on these conclusions
well, that's okay. You're allowed to, but this is the truth. That's exactly what happened. He came to me and he said, "It's done. Wow. We're going to take care of it. This is a good thing. It's a good thing for the soldiers. It's a good thing for everybody." And then he had the press conference the next week.
But why would anybody be? It's so
later.
funny. So how they just choose to be against things, even good things. It's unquestionably a really good thing, right?
That one is a really good thing.
Like I said in the last one, I think this Ibogaine thing is a good thing, and it's something that Rogan has been consistently advocating for a long time. He was the first person that I ever heard talking about this Ibogaine stuff years and years ago. And so it's one of the only issues that he has been consistent for throughout his entire career. It's not that surprising that he would back Trump on something like this. What is interesting about this is how much Trump used it as a little piece of leverage to get some good press from Rogan. That's all this is. That's how Trump's brain works. He knows who has the most powerful voice and who he wants to ingratiate himself with. And so this little interaction that Rogan keeps talking about, he keeps saying this is so wild, this is so cool. And in a way it is, because anybody wants to be able to just text the president and have them be like, "I did that for you." That is genuinely crazy. But think about what's happening on the other end of that. Rogan has talked about the Iran war and how this is a betrayal of his base. Trump needs good press right now. And it's very clear that Trump views Rogan as the most important figure in media. He's going scorched earth on everybody else that has mildly criticized him. Some of them less than Rogan has criticized him. And Rogan hasn't been that critical either. He's been pretty mild, which is partially why Trump is doing this. But I also think it's just because Trump doesn't want to burn this bridge with Rogan. He views Rogan as very important for him to reach the center of the country, middle America, whatever the calculation is there. I don't know, because he doesn't seem to think Tucker Carlson is important or any of the mainstays on the right, like Fox News. He goes after them constantly, and he doesn't seem to have any interest in going after Rogan. So that's not going to last. Now, my prediction of how this is going to go down, I mentioned on the last one that I think Rogan is going to be a big voice advocating for Trump going into the midterms. That's why Trump did this. The midterms are looking bad for him. He needs as many voices as he can, especially in places like Texas, talking about Trump, continuing to normalize him and point out, "Hey, he's doing this and he's doing this, and there's this good thing about Trump. And did you know I texted him about Ibogaine?" He needs that right now. So Rogan is probably going to do that going into the midterms. And Trump is going to get shellacked. The Republicans are going to get shellacked in the midterms, and we'll get to that more later. There were some good results for Democrats last night. And so after that, I think is when things are going to get sticky. So a lot of people are already turning on Trump, even before this midterm cycle. Who knows how many of them are going to go back to bat for him in order to stop the Democrats, whatever. We're going to see some of that, but they are jumping ship early. Rogan isn't. So that means Rogan is now an even more important voice for Trump because he's one of the few that is still talking about him in a positive way when almost all of these podcaster guys have turned on him. So that has the potential to change some of their minds, frankly. But I think a lot of those guys are feeling some genuine pressure from their audience to be more critical of Trump. And the people who are pressuring these podcasters online are people who are getting more fed up with Trump and wanting to push away from him and wanting them to say something that's going to escalate this fracture and this pressure that is on Trump currently. I think that's sort of the dynamic there. Rogan's a little more insulated from that. He does not depend on a day-to-day audience or donations from his audience or whatever, the way some of these other podcasters might. And so he can afford to tune them out a little bit more. And that's why you get this constant thing from him about, I don't read the comments. And I think that's mostly true. I think there's times where he dips in a little bit and pays attention to what people are saying. But that's a major privilege that Rogan has as a result of having what he calls fuck you money that some of his other friends don't have as much, that he's constantly giving this advice to ignore the audience, ignore the comments, that they don't have as much insulation from that as Rogan does. Rogan can afford to burn a few $1 million if the audience is mad at him, he loses some viewership, things go one way or the other. It's like he has enough money that he's built to absorb it at this point. But I am getting sick of this dumb guy routine of like, why are people getting mad? People just make up something to be mad about? Like, what's the problem? That's such a completely thoughtless way of going about it. And in a way, I can understand that. I can understand feeling like people are stretching as much as they can to find a way to make this bad because it is a good thing. And I think there's some truth to that. It reminds me of when Trump was like doing some criminal justice reform stuff in the first term. And so to have some people advocating for that, you had Kim Kardashian and even Kanye West were up in the White House advocating for that. And I don't think that in and of itself is bad. But the thing is that the reason that Trump, especially if he's going to go out of his way to get something done for you, which is the story that you're telling us, the reason he's doing that is because you benefit him as much on the other end. So it's worth scrutinizing. What are the ways I benefit him? Do I want to benefit him in that way? Is it worth it? Is opening up some of the research on this ibogaine stuff, which might be short-lived, might get shut down within a year by this Trump administration, who knows where it would even go? Is it worth laundering some of the worst things that Trump is doing right now? That's what a person should be asking themselves. And this type of quid quo pro that Trump is doing with Rogan is letting it bear that that's exactly what this is. He needs help from Rogan, and so he's willing to do this. He's willing to go out of his way to do this. So Rogan's using his leverage, but eventually that's going to dry up. Rogan's not going to be as relevant, or Trump is just going to do what he always does and just throw this motherfucker out. And I think what's going to happen, like I said, Rogan is going to advocate for Trump going into the midterms. He's going to be talking about Democrats, and he's going to really continue building this narrative about why Democratic policy in general is bad, how it's all fraud and all the welfare is fake and it's all vaccines and inflation and it's all made up fake news. That's the kind of stuff he's going to be saying going into the midterms, because that's what he's already saying right now. And after Trump and the Republicans lose pretty bad in the midterms, Rogan's probably going to still cape for him, but he's also going to start pointing out his flaws more, which he might continue doing through the midterms. One thing I will say about Rogan is I don't think he's that opportunistic about these things that he says, but his position is quite strategic. And you can see that because he got this ibogaine stuff through. So after there's less of a strategy to be had and it looks like Trump is really a dying fish or a lame duck, Rogan's going to be more negative about him. That's when Trump is going to fully burn this bridge. And that might be spectacular. Look, we see this all the time, every time with Trump, with these friendly relationships, we see the bridge get burned at some point. And it's going to happen with Zohran Mamdani in New York too. It seems like he has a reasonable amount of command over that relationship at this point, or at least they both, again, seem to be getting something out of it. So the quid quo pro is working. And, the pattern we've seen with Trump is eventually he gets frustrated with that or he feels slighted. And so he goes scorched earth on you. So that's probably what's going to happen, especially with people on his side, like Rogan. That's the most likely fate. So to transition into some good news here, some interesting good news. So some of you may have heard by now that the Infowars deal went through for the name to be owned or operated by The Onion. So originally The Onion was going to buy the outfit. Now the deal is that they are going to lease the rights to use Infowars and the brand, etc., for like a 6-month period. So they're going to take control of Infowars, and Tim Heidecker is going to be in charge of it for a certain 6-month period. I don't know if they're going to try to turn a profit, or what the owner of The Onion said is that they're going to use it charitably to try to get some money to the families of Sandy Hook victims, because Alex Jones still hasn't paid them. So their plan is to use Infowars as kind of a satirical outlet to raise some merch money and at least get them some cash, get them some money in their hands. That's what the owner had to say about it. So here's Tim Heidecker making this announcement that he's going to be taking over, and talking very briefly about what he plans to do with it, although the plans are still loose. They don't seem like they're exactly sure what they want to do.
Hey everybody, I got some breaking news for you. It's looking very likely that Global Tetrahedron will seize control of Infowars in the coming days. The folks at Global Tetrahedron have asked me to step in as to run the show over there and become a big part of the future. So we're exploring. Sorry. My name is Tim Heidecker. I'm just here to let you know that I am now in charge of Infowars. It's an honor to take over the reins and chart a new path towards the future. We're looking forward to relaunching the site soon in the next coming months, and we're not really sure what we're going to do with it. We're talking about all sorts of ideas. We were playing around with it being a real estate broker service, or a cryptocurrency exchange market, a place to store pictures, almost like a
all right, so
Dropbox
great Alex
account.
Jones impression here. I mean, this has the potential to be like generational satire, and it's really great because the culture, the online culture of like Majority Report mocking right-wingers, Michael Brooks style impressions, and the type of, satirizing that they do still through to this day. And then Tim Heidecker has picked up on that a little bit, at least in that space. He's always done some form of satire, but it seems like he at some point thought that what Sam was doing was smart and started doing something similar, parodying Rogan and doing these like endless podcasts and satire. So he has carved out more of a lane, especially with this like comedian character that he has done, like the old washed up right-wing comedian. So the perfect person to do this, also a little bit out of left field. I'm curious to see, because Tim Heidecker has a very cult following, but not a mainstream following. So I think this could be really interesting. It could be some like performance art. Maybe they'll do a straightforward parody. Maybe they'll just try to make it as out there as possible. I'm curious to see. But if done well, this could be one of the greatest like parodies of right-wing culture ever, and for a good cause too. And so here's Alex Jones responding to this really quick, shirtless for some reason. I think he's making a point about The Onion taking the shirt off his back. So here's that.
You can't take something over and then act like you're somebody, even if you say it's a parody. You can do a parody of somebody, but none of you took something from them.
Right.
We've already checked with lawyers, so they're in deep shit. I've already suing the Democrat Party law firms, already got civil rights lawsuits. So you think, look, just because you're wearing my shirt, don't mean you're me. So let's be 100% clear about that. And so you guys just keep laughing, just like you did a year and a half ago, or it was November 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So is that about a year and a half?
Yeah, this is a story from December 10th. Sale of Alex Jones Infowars to The Onion rejected. And I'll get into this. And
So but yeah, they need to be us to confuse people. By the way, it's a total failure. It goes, we're the 5th biggest newspapers. That's a lie. Newspapers are all dead. Okay?
I looked it up. The Onion gets less than half of the traffic that Infowars gets.
And remember, they said they were going to be Charlie Kirk. Remember when he died, they said we're going to misrepresent fake quotes of him. This is what the left do. They try to silence you, then they misrepresent who you are. They're body snatchers. They're skinwalkers. They literally take your skin. This is going to backfire big time, folks.
While a lot of people are using the word collapse to describe what we're seeing in the right-wing world right now, I think there is simply too much money there for us to really reliably say that the right-wing movement as a whole is collapsing. I think Trump's base of support is still going to remain relatively strong, even if some loud voices are questioning him. And I think all of these individual voices, including Alex Jones, are going to continue to carve out a lane for themselves. That's what Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are doing, particularly with the conspiracy theories and shit. Like when Candace Owens goes out there with the Charlie Kirk conspiracy theory, she dominated the narrative on the right for like the next, 2-3 months on Charlie Kirk, totally diverted the narrative that the mainstream right was trying to go for on Charlie Kirk. And I think Tucker Carlson is picking up on that a little bit when it comes to Butler. He's trying to now paint the idea that Butler was faked or staged. I don't know if they're trying to say that it was Israel that tried to kill him or that it was staged. I really don't know. I don't know what the expediency of Tucker making the point that the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania was staged. I mean, I know why it makes sense for liberals to say that. And I know that Tucker Carlson is being very contrarian at the moment and trying to find ways to criticize Trump that will also continue to appease the perpetually hungry for red meat base. So how can you say things that meet the needs of both of them at the same time? And it seems like threading criticism of the administration into criticism of Israel, sometimes through incredibly tortured conspiratorial means, seems to be the way they're going. And I think that's going to work. And so Trump becoming a target of that propaganda and becoming the one who is like the stooge in that propaganda, what it means is that their rhetoric is just evolving in a different direction. And so they are eventually going to coalesce around some different leader. Maybe it's Tucker Carlson or somebody else. But the question is like, is that movement going to gain the same type of real momentum that Trump's movement had? And I think after the Trump era, depending on where it goes, we're still not out of the woods yet, but that's going to be very tough for them to put back together the pieces of this coalition that are shattering. And I think that's why Tucker is going in such an idiosyncratic direction and saying things that seem like he's trying to appeal to the left, because he sees that the coalition on the right is currently completely shattered, and there's going to need to be some long-term policy behind whatever politicians decide to be talking about going forward. Like there needs to be a real addressing of things like healthcare or things like America and Israel and the type of wars that happen. I do think there's a lot of people on the right, maybe not commentators, but people in the country on the right who are concerned about war. And I think that the systemic nature of that problem has been laid bare. And conservatives and Republicans never have any answers for systemic problems. They have no interest in solving any systemic problem. They are only interested in looking at something on its face and saying, how can we repress this or put a Band-Aid on this or cut this or stop talking about this? That's usually the Republican approach. And I think that the time is just ticking on that. And so you see a lot of people on the right flailing to try to find a different type of rhetoric that works for this moment. And that's why Democrats are gaining ground. And in Virginia, Democrats just had a big win last night, basically on redistricting. So redistricting was on the ballot. People of Virginia voted, and they voted in favor of redistricting Virginia, heavily in favor of Democrats. So Democrats are now likely to flip 4 seats in Virginia, which just increases their chances of taking back the House, maybe by an even stronger majority. We'll see what happens there. So that was kind of already expected to happen, the taking back of the House. But this momentum being built on the gerrymandering side is very good, and you see the heat is being raised on Republicans, and this does seem to be one issue where they're not able to get their feet underneath them in terms of saying how could you possibly be doing this? Because anybody who knows what gerrymandering or redistricting is knows that Republicans have been doing it systemically for the last 50 years. But again, they have no interest in the systemic problem, just the current political issue that gerrymandering is about to wipe them out. So in Texas and Virginia, we've seen some good gerrymandering efforts, and we've seen some good Democratic redistricting. Democrats are starting to figure out what the right messaging is. You heard Walz talking about how the next Democrat needs to figure out universal health care. Not that surprising coming from him. He's the type of Democrat who's been pushing for that. But the more Democrats start to come to that conclusion, the better. And the more this momentum rises on the blue side, it is going to encourage the conversation to move further left, even with some of these centrist Democrats being resistant to that. The more this surge starts to be apparent, it's a double-edged sword, because Democrats are going to feel a little bit too comfortable, but also there's going to be a little bit more of a sailing to victory for certain Democratic candidates, I believe, progressive candidates especially. So what we're going to hear from the Rogans and others on the right going into this election season, going into the next presidential election season, is insisting that Democrats are the only ones who do things like gerrymandering, or that Democratic policies are the ones that have created all of these problems that Trump is now fighting against. That's the framing they love. I think this war has kind of obliterated their ability to go with that. Now Trump owns all of the economic problems, so that's fantastic. And Rogan specifically is going to go after issues of like welfare and benefits and say that, you know, immigrants are getting all these free benefits and it's all fraud. That's the narrative that they're going to try to go with to chip away at the momentum, not just behind Democrats right now, but behind systemic reforms that are going to solve some of these systemic problems that Republicans use to entrench their own power and continue making false promises. So as long as the left keeps focusing on those systemic problems, whether it be at home with policing and healthcare and other things, or abroad with our activity in Israel and other countries, that kind of talk is going to dominate the narrative going forward. There's not that much that Republicans can do about it, which is why Tucker Carlson is trying to figure out a way to outflank. So as long as people like AOC and others on the left who are prominent don't allow them to do that and engage with that directly, then I think at least the current bravado of the Trump administration and this right-wing movement is on its last legs, and we are probably going to move into a much weaker phase of the Trump administration soon.